Hey guys, welcome to a Bet the Prop sponsored stream here on Peter Overzet's YouTube channel. Normally the man's wrestles it away from me, but every now and again I get it back, and I'm joined right now by Cort Smith from Bet the Prop. Cort, how you doing?
What's up, Pete? I'm so good. Spent the last day breaking down these couple games, and I love these cards, and I'm excited for some playoff football. How about you?
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. This whole week has been, it has slowly become one of my favorite weeks of the season. I've been doing the FFPC playoff challenge stuff, and then on top of that, getting ready for DFS and now all the prop stuff. So yeah, I'm loving it.
Awesome, man. Give me a quick rundown of the FFPC high stakes. What's going on there?
Yeah, so there they just have a playoff challenge. It's kind of a set it and forget it type lineup where you fill 10 spots, obviously 12 teams, so you got to pick which two teams you want to fade. And then it's just you kind of let the chips fall how they may, but there's some kind of strategy in that you can only pick one player from each team. Yep. And okay. Yeah, so it makes it fun, and it's kind of where do you want to get contrarian is right. What gets interesting here. All right, Cort, I am making sure we're not having any tech issues here because I'm not seeing the video feed right now in my browser.
I am.
You are? Okay, good.
Yeah, it's looks like we're up on YouTube.
Okay, cool. For some reason, it just hadn't loaded yet. But if you guys are in the chat, let me know if you can hear me and Cort just fine, just so we know. We had some trouble last week when we tried this where we couldn't hear Cort, so just trying to make sure everything's good. So if you're in the chat, let me know that everything is good. All right, Cort, so let's jump into this. You guys had some articles go up last night on bettheprop.com. You can see these here. You guys wrote about, Ben Battle wrote about the Colts, and you had some picks for the Seahawks. What's interesting to you? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, the Texans game, we might as well start there. That game kicks off in about 3 hours. So let's start with Eric Ebron. I think he's one of the favorite targets here when Ben broke down these games. We're taking the over on 4 receptions at minus 130 at 5 dimes. Pretty juicy on that bet. Somebody tweeted at me this morning wondering if I like the over 4.5, but really I think 4 is kind of the max there. I don't like playing it much over than that, but it's a pretty good spot for Ebron. One of the things that I think will factor in here, T.Y. Hilton is a go in this game, but he certainly looked a little bit limited last week. So tough to kind of slot him in for his usual amount of targets. And that could be good things for Ebron, who has done pretty well against the Colts this year. He had a touchdown in each game versus Indy, and really he's sort of been the main guy in Indy since Doyle went down. Jack Doyle went down. 9.4 targets per game with Doyle out of the lineup. A 21% market share, which is elite for tight ends. So that's a nice little look for Ebron. The Colts are also passing a lot more. 38.3 pass attempts since week 9. So, should be some good volume there. 4 is a nice number. And then as well, looking at the other side of the ball, the Texans, the pass defense in general, pretty poor, and that holds true when it comes to tight ends. 6th most tight end targets against. The Texans have allowed. They also have allowed a 75% catch rate for tight ends. So, that's the second highest one in the league at 75%. So tight ends really have had no problem catching the ball at all against the Texans. And then just in terms of raw yards, which is we're less interested in here, but certainly a nice proxy for this prop, 6th most passing yards allowed. So, yeah, Ebron's a pretty good spot. He has, I think 4 is sort of median number for him, and that's why I don't want to go any higher. He has 4 catches in 5 of his last healthy games. He had a concussion in that Week 15 game, so a little bit lower number there. But, given his overall volume, that 21% market share is really exciting, and the matchup is really exciting against Houston. So I think 4 is a solid bet despite the minus 130 juice on Ebron. I also want to mention on Ebron, if you want to get a little bit more action there, On 5 dimes, his touchdown prop is offering plus 120. Touchdown props, not typically something I focus on a lot. I don't like the one-time events too much. They're very high variance. But he did have a touchdown in each of the game versus Indy this year, and I think he's certainly going to be a target of Andrew Luck when they get down in the red zone again. So I think at plus odds of 120, it might be worth a little bit of a punt there.
Yeah, what do you think on Bovada? The number for Ebron is 4.5, but a little less juice at minus 115. Do you prefer the more juice in the smaller number?
Yeah, I'm always going to take the smaller number there. And in fact, 4.5 receptions, I'm probably going to pass on that if that's the only line you're looking at. On this one, we can hit 4 and sort of free roll from there. But 5 is a different number, and just looking at his numbers this year, over his last 5 games, he had 10 receptions versus Jacksonville, and then it was 4, 1, 3, 4 over the next 4. So, like I say, I think 4 is a nice kind of median number for him, and I don't really want to push it that much further. I'd much rather take the better number at a poorer price.
Makes sense. We got a question in the chat. Paul is wondering about Watson's over under 39.5 yards. I'm looking at it right now at 5 dimes. Looks like they have it at 41.5. Do you have a lean there?
Yeah, and in fact, let me just bring this up here. I think it's even higher elsewhere.
Yeah,
at sportsbook.com, it's actually at 43.5. So, yeah, that's an interesting spot. I think that number's too high. Even at 39.5, I think it's too high, and I'd be leaning towards the under. Watson in his 2 games versus Indy this year was pretty good, but not that good. He went 6 for 41 and 6 for 41 and 5 for 41 against Indy in 2 games this year, which is a pretty nice number, but I do think that's sort of his ceiling. So if you're betting that number, you're hoping to kind of hit his ceiling there. It's hard to see him getting much more than that against Indy, who allows the 6th fewest rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks on the season. They're a pretty tough matchup given their zone defense. They've limited lots of scrambling quarterbacks this year, like Dak Prescott with that zone look. So yeah, I think that 41 number we saw him hit earlier this year is really sort of his ceiling. So if you do want to play that, I do think under is the play. Not much fun fading a guy like Watson who can burn you on a single play. But, just looking at the numbers, I think the under is the clear play there, and look around and try to get, if you want to play the under, look around and try to get the biggest number you can. You mentioned 41.5. I see 43.5. I think under 39.5 is fine as well.
Yeah, he mentioned 39.5. 5 dimes has it at 41.5, but you can go to Bovada. You can get it 42.5 and minus 115. So, yeah, Paul, shop around there if you do like the under because you can get a few more yards. Keep the questions coming, guys. I'll pass those along to Cort. Let's talk about the other play that Ben wrote up in his article. This is a play I like a lot. He's been getting DFS buzz this week. We know that the Texans are pretty stout against the run. Lots of hype about Nyheim Heinz getting more work in the passing game. And what do you think about this prop over 25.5 receiving yards?
Yeah, we've really seen the increase in work for Heinz in the last few weeks. This Colts certainly are a bit of a game script dependent team, but and that might be playing into it. But yeah, we've really seen a boost for him. Over his first 11 games, he had 22.5 receiving yards per game on 4.6 targets per game. And then over the last 5 games, really spiked there. 35.4 yards per game on 6 targets per game. So, an increase of about 25% targets per game there for him. That's a huge difference when we're talking about a number that is under 20. Under 30, I should say. It's a pretty small number. So 25% difference in targets is a big difference. And Houston, again, a pretty nice target. Again, we've talked about, kind of how poor their pass defense is, and that does carry over to the receiving running backs. They've allowed, let's see here. Looking at, they've been really stout in run defense as well, which kind of factors into this as well. 2.3 yards per carry the Colts managed against the Texans in 2 games this year. And the Texans have allowed the lowest yards per carry in the league at just 3.1. So we're going to talk about Marlin Mack, kind of extending on that play a little bit in a moment, but I think that really means that Heinz could be a little bit busier than usual. I can't see the Colts trying to, keep banging into that brick wall of a Texans pass defense. And we've seen they're more than willing to use Heinz in the passing game, and I don't see any reason why that should stop here. So, just looking at that 35.4 average over the last 5 games, well clear of our line of 25.5. I see tons of value there, even at the minus 130 vig.
Yeah, and looking at Bovada, it looks like that's still at minus 130. 5 Dimes has it a little bit higher, minus 135. Minus 145 there. So if you're picking between those, definitely get it on Bovada. And yeah, if you're using him in DFS as your $3,500 DraftKings pump play running back, you definitely want to correlate it with this prop, because you're going to need him to go over 25.5 receiving yards if you want him to pay off in your DFS lineups. So yeah, let's transition to Marlin Mack, the other guy in that backfield. And this is kind of a correlated play, right? In that if they're funneling more receptions to the running back, then we're looking at maybe less rushing yards for Marlin Mack. So why don't you run us through this play?
Yeah, that's the idea. The Texans really just elite against the run in their Week 14 matchup. Just a brutal day for Marlin Mack. 14 carries, 33 yards for a 2.4 yards per carry. That was his worst mark of the season. He did 2.4 as well against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Didn't play against the Texans in their first meeting. But yeah, that Week 14 matchup, the Colts tried to run it. 14 attempts is right about his average for the year, but 33 yards, absolutely brutal. And we've seen that same trend carry over in other Texans games this year. Teams just no luck running the ball against them. And another thing, it is a small number, 51.5. And I think you were mentioning you saw it at 54.5 at Bovada?
Yes, that's where I got it last night. I'll scroll up here and double check.
Sure. So we got the 51.5 at 5 Dimes last night. A nice price on it, minus 110. Obviously would rather have the 54 if you can find it.
Yeah.
It's a low number for a guy who's going to get 15 carries, I would think. So we are sort of relying on the lack of efficiency here because, Max, he had 27 total attempts in weeks 15. Sorry, 27 attempts in week 15 and then 25 again in week 17. So, there's going to be volume there, I think. But the line on this one, plus 1.5. When I'm playing the over on running backs, and this is something we'll talk about when we get into Ezekiel Elliott later, but when I'm playing the over on running backs, I really want to see a game script. I want to see that point spread towards more of a touchdown. That's going to suggest a lot of volume for a running back. And when the spread markets are telling me that it's going to be a close game, that means to me that it's going to limit the amount of rushes available for each running back. So I don't see Marlin Mack getting up to 20 carries again in this game. And we've seen the efficiency has been really poor. So I think it'll be close. I sort of see it around the hopefully low 40s range in this one for Marlin Mack. But tough to see him increasing on his efficiency against an elite run defense. And I really think the Colts are going to kind of pivot to more of a pass-happy approach. Any reason that you can see, Pete, where we might be off on this one, where the over might be the play, or?
No, I like it. And I think the maybe thing to separate is I think there's still a path for him to have a good DFS day. He could easily have 50 yards rushing and 2 TDs at the goal line. So I don't think he's a bad play. And I actually think, again, for DFS purposes, he correlates pretty well with the Colts defense. If you want to get contrarian with everyone trying to stack this game up from a passing perspective, it's not bad. But yeah, I have a hard time seeing him get there. And we know how much the Colts want to throw the ball, and I have a feeling in this game they're just going to kind of throw out the ground and pound as much as possible unless they get a really big lead or something like that. So yeah. I like that call.
And they're pretty just quick. They're very game script dependent, as Ben pointed out. 20 rush attempts in games that India has won by at least 10 points, and then in all the other games, just 12 rush attempts per game. So they are very beholden to sort of what's going on in the game script. And I think, 3 points separating these teams in their first two meetings. I think it's going to be a close one again. And I think 15 carries is kind of his ceiling today.
Excellent. Yeah. Are there any other plays you want to talk about in this game before we move on? We know everybody has Kiki Kuti fever. They can't get enough of this guy. Anytime you can, bet on a guy who's been out for 9 weeks with a hamstring injury, I think you got to do it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, fun for DFS guys. For us prop bettors, there's no lines being offered on Kiki. And in fact, that whole uncertainty has really sort of limited the number of props available this week on the on that side of the ball for the Texans. I think DeAndre Hopkins, Lamar Miller, and DeAndre Carter were the only 3 skill players that had props available as of yesterday. And I think a lot of that had to do with the uncertainty surrounding Kiki Kuti. Ryan Griffin would have been a guy I would have liked to attack, but we're not seeing a line on him. He had 80 yards versus the Colts in week 14. So in terms of other plays, I think DeAndre Hopkins and Hilton, I'm not playing those lines. Hilton is probably worth an under. We saw him quite limited in that matchup last week. And he's been a little bit hit and miss against the Colts previously. 175 yards, 49 yards, 88 yards, 223 yards, 121 yards, and 78 yards. His line last time I looked was in the mid-80s. So if you want to play that, I think the under's decent. Hopkins, same thing, 36 yards in the week 14 matchup between these two teams, and then 169. So you're kind of guessing there. You're kind of flipping coins, which I don't really like to do. If you want to play nuke, I think the under is probably the play. But yeah, those are not my favorite plays. And then the other one I like, we mentioned the Watson under rushing. We already covered that. So I think those are a nice way to attack. And then the Ebron TD, if you want to get a little funky at plus 120, is not a bad play as well.
Yeah, I will just toss this out there. We were talking about, I don't know what the movement has been on the DeAndre Carter line for receptions since the news that Kiki was most likely to play. It's at 3 on Bovada, the under minus 110. If Kiki goes, that number seems a little high for Carter, right? Considering Carter's been playing in the slot, you would assume he would just get kicked out of there and only play, maybe 10 to 15 snaps? Yeah,
I think that's a great call. I think we have to assume at this point that, Kiki Kuti, if he's out there, he's not going to be a decoy. He's going to have a full complement of snaps. I don't see any reason to think otherwise. If those DeAndre Carter props are still out there, I think it's a great play for sure.
All right, we'll do one more because we got a question from Jim in the chat. He wants to know your thoughts on taking the under on Luck passing yards.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We talked about how I think the Colts are going to pivot pass happy in this one. It's clear to me that the books they're begging us to take the over on this one. They really, really, really want us to take the over. Let's see. The under at Bet Online, the under is plus 128 at 310.5. Projection at 290. The under is the play. It's one of those ones that we could end up looking really, really stupid because he could easily throw for 400 yards again. But the under is the play. He had those massive games against Houston. He had his 2 biggest passing outputs against Houston this year. But if you're betting on that again, you're sort of betting on him bucking, the regression to the mean. I think the more likely scenario here is that he does regress to the mean a little bit. Against the Texans pass defense. So, if you want to play, I do think under is the play, but it's not going to be a lot of fun, and it could be one of those that's over in the third quarter for you as well. Just keep that in mind. But, Sean Corner at Action Network has a projection of 290 on him, well under the line. So, I don't think you can play over here. I think it's a pass or the under for Luck.
Yeah, and Jim actually just mentioned Oddsmaker in the chat too, and I'm just looking at the Fantasy Labs props tool right now, and it looks like he's under on everything with Luck, the rush yards, the TDs. And on Bovada, if you do want to play that under, you can get it at plus 120, 310.5. if Godspeed. It's a little scary with how much they love to throw and them going against a pass funnel, but I don't think that's a bad play. Do you want to move on to this second game, Cowboys Seahawks?
Yeah, let's do it. I think we covered it all pretty well. Maybe I'll just mention quick, if anyone's wondering about the Watson passing yards, I think that, again, the under's probably the play there. And a lot of that has to do with Will Fuller. Significant splits without Will Fuller in his 11 career games with Fuller, 288 yards in 11 games with Fuller, 224 yards in 12 games without. So pretty significant sample and a huge difference there. So, if you're looking at the Watson one, I think the under is the play.
Nice. Trevor Marshall in the chat is trolling me and our friend Mans. He's asking if the Bengals make it in. This guy, Cort, every time, and again, just I watched, I had no part in it, but he would come into the Mans chat and every single week ask a Gio Bernard question, even when he was out. So there's this contingent of Gio Bernard truthers, and they found their way into our prop betting show. Do you have anything about the Bengals for them that could possibly be relevant today?
I got nothing, man. I got nothing. I can tell you that I won't be drafting Joe Mixon again next year at whatever his price is. That's about all I can tell you.
There you go. Harpo, what's up, man? He says, hi, guys. Happy New Year. Harpo was with us last week in the chat.
What's up, Harpo?
We had me and Cort tried to get this going, and then I didn't have Cort's audio, so I was his translator relaying things to him. It was a very powerful position for me to be in. All right, let's talk here. Do you want to start with this first play here? Cowboys, Dak Prescott under 245.5 passing yards?
Sure, yeah, this was the first one I keyed in on when I started breaking down this game. It really jumped out to me. I mean, looking at the averages, it's not a bad play, but I am sort of playing this idea here that Dak Prescott really struggles against zone defenses, and I think we have sufficient evidence at this point to say that that's a trend worth attacking. They played the Colts a couple weeks back. That is another predominantly zone defense, as well as Seattle, whom they'll be facing today. And let's see here. So these two teams met in week 3. The Seahawks held him to 168 yards on 34 attempts. That was a 4.9 yards per attempt average, which was pretty much his worst of the year, I believe. Last year, these two teams met as well, and Pete Carroll's unit held him to 181 yards, a 5.3 yards per attempt average. His career average, by the way, is 7.4 yards per attempt. So, a significant drop there in the yards per attempt average when Dak faces these zone defenses. And then 3 weeks ago against the Colts, 206 yards for Dak Prescott on 5.3 yards per attempt. A nice little trend there. I think Evan Silva has harped on this a lot in his matchups columns all year long. Prescott struggles versus the zone defenses. I like that. And then another curious thing I came up with was when these two teams met in Seattle earlier this year, Prescott's line at Bovada was set at 205.5, and now he's at home and he's getting a line of 245.5. Which makes no sense to me. His home advantage is not worth 40 points. His home and away splits are a 13-point difference, 13 points better at home. So why he's suddenly being given 40 yards more against the same team he's already faced and bombed out against makes no sense to me. So that line is just too high for me. And I think that, as we'll get into a little bit here, the Cowboys, no secret to DFS players, the Cowboys are going to want to run the ball this week. I think that, and as well are the Seahawks, right? Both of these teams love to run the ball. They're both in the top third when it comes to run attempts and in the bottom third when it comes to pass attempts. So it's no secret what's going to happen in this game. And I really don't think, Dak is going to be counted on, unless Seattle can jump out to a big lead, some turnovers, something like that. It's going to be a lot of Zeke. It's going to be conservative offense from Dak. It's going to be him struggling against that zone defense. And I really don't see him popping even 210 yards in this game. So 245, I think, is a phenomenal number.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that gives me a little pause with it, and I was actually listening to Evan Silva and Warren Sharp talk about this morning, is just kind of the philosophical shift the Cowboys have had throughout the season, and there's been a few things that have led to that. Obviously, getting Amari Cooper gave them more of a a weapon, and then they started throwing to Ezekiel Elliott more. So you're at risk for Zeke kind of breaking off some screen passes for longer gains than usual as much as they're using him. And then Warren Sharp brought up a good point. I mean, last week they had an oddly aggressive philosophical mindset in that game, leaving their starters out there, which was, completely reckless and dumb, but it showed an aggression that I don't think we've seen from Jason Garrett as much. So I think this might come down to ultimately like what kind of game script. Obviously I think ultimately they want to run first, but if the Seahawks are scoring, their hand might be forced, and in that narrative I could see him hitting the over if it got, if they got down. But I do like it on face value though, the under.
Yeah, and I mean I like the Seahawks in this game, so I think they're going to win it. So that does suggest maybe a bit more volume for Dak Prescott. And, maybe I'm selling him a little bit short here. He is a bit better at home. And you're right, they have been passing a lot more. His attempts sort of medianing out at kind of high 20s in the first half of the season. And then over, the last 4 games, 54 attempts, 39 attempts, 25 attempts, 44 attempts. All 3 of those were the 3 highest figures for the year for Dak. So you're right, definitely much more aggressive. But that was against Philadelphia, horrible pass defense. That was against Tampa Bay, horrible pass defense. And then against the Giants, that was that Week 17 game against the Giants. I don't know what to make of that. That surprised a lot of people how aggressive they were with that. So I'm not sure if we should put a lot into that or not. But yeah, just looking at the seasonal averages here, Seattle averaging 240 against for opposing QBs. So the averages are sort of close and indicate towards the under. And then the tiebreaker for me, just Dak struggles against zone. And I do think they're going to be running the ball a lot. Seattle pretty susceptible to the run. So.
All right, let's move on to this Chris Carson prop. Chris Carson, weeks 13 through 17, led the league in touches. We know what Seattle wants to do, and that's give this guy the ball. I guess the question then becomes, how is this matchup for him versus Dallas? What are your thoughts here? You obviously like the over on the 78.5 rushing yards.
I've got over 70.5. So are you looking at one that's climbed?
Oh, I just saw it in the article at 70.5.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said 78.5. I might have missed.
Sorry.
Yeah, 70.5. This is it's an interesting one. I've seen some various lines across different books. I saw 75.5. I saw 72.5. So I found the lowest number at Bovada, 70.5 yesterday, at a really nice price, 110. I believe that price has changed considerably since then. So, at the 75.5, it was a no play for me, and I wasn't going to touch it. When I saw that 70.5, I got suckered in a little bit. I think it's going to be close. Sean Corner's projecting 71 yards for Carson, and that makes a lot of sense. It's the game script is going to be slow. Both teams are going to be running, as we mentioned. Play volume is going to be capped in this game. So 71 yards makes a lot of sense. We don't normally chase efficiency in these prop bets, mostly like to chase volume, but it's hard to ignore the efficiency on both sides of the ball here. Carson over his last 3 games, 357 yards total, 5.3 yards per carry. The Cowboys, meanwhile, over their last 335 yards for a 4.5 yard per carry clip. So, a nice spot, I think, for him. Seattle's going to want to run the ball, no doubt. And, this conservative line for Carson is no surprise. I was a little bit surprised looking at it, but looking at the history, that's what we've seen. So looking back at his last 8 games, his average prop rushing line has been set at 69.5 yards. He's beat that line 7 out of 8 times, which is an amazing trend on its own, but he's blown it away, really. The average margin that he surpassed the line in those last 8 games has been 33 yards. So, surpassing it by a good 33%, which is huge in the world of props. And then the only time he went under in those 8 occasions was just by 7.5 yards. So, I do have some game script concerns in this one, but 70 is just a little too low for me to resist. 75, if you see that number, I think it's probably avoidable. If you feel really good about it, go ahead and hit that 75.5. I like the 70.5 number. I do think they're going to be running it a lot. Dallas vulnerable to the run. And, we've seen from Seattle what their MO is. So it's a lot of Chris Carson.
All right, I hate to derail us here, but we might have to circle back to DeAndre Hopkins props because he just walked into the stadium. I'm looping this via the Twitter wearing, is that the It clown mask? So the swag factor for DeAndre Hopkins is through the roof. I feel like he keeps holding my beer himself, like throughout the season with these outfits. Like Halloween, he was dressed as Avatar. Then he came in wearing a skirt last week, and now he's just full-blown like It cosplay. So are we adjusting our projections for DeAndre Hopkins with this news?
You know what? I'm gonna have to talk to Sean Siegel and see if we can add the outfit bling split on the RotoViz splits app and find out what's up with that, because I don't know what the correlation is there.
Yeah. Sorry.
Let's look here. So Hopkins line. Woo! It's big, man.
95 was it?
90. Yeah. I mean, my philosophy on props, I'm rarely chasing numbers like that. I get if you'd want to play it, totally understand, makes a lot of sense. That number's too big for me. You're not going to find me chasing numbers over 90 very often at all. It's just such a big number. And when it comes to these big stars, the big name stars, the Tyreek Hills and Hopkins and Antonio Browns, I think those props are always juiced a little higher. Just because they're public plays, they're big names, and I think they always get a little bit more yardage than they should. So they tend to be unders or no play for me. And again, same thing if I'm chasing a number like that, I want it to be in a game where DeAndre Hopkins is a 10-point underdog. Right. In a game like this, that's going to be close. His target volume is pretty assured no matter what. That said, I do want to mention. Yeah. So the last time that we mentioned Kiki Kuti before. Yeah. And we haven't seen him since week 14 was the last time he was healthy. But the last time he was healthy, he led the team in targets and receptions. He had 10 receptions in that game. So, I'm not going to claim that he's really going to cut into the work for Nuke. I think that, his share is pretty assured, but something to be aware of. I think that Kiki is definitely going to see some work today. I think that just making Nuke the pure focus of this offense would be a mistake, and Kiki's been serviceable. So I do see some targets going Kiki's way coming off of Nuke's market share there. And that number is just too high for me, 94.5. I'm never chasing that number. So it's an under or no play for me, despite the clown costume.
Yeah, and we've seen it too. I mean, he had divisional opponents, so he played him 2 times this game. I believe he hung 190 on him. One of the meetings, but then the second meeting they sold out to stop him. They were using safeties, linebackers, and he only had 40 yards and then, sucked out with a touchdown at the end. So you got to assume that they're thinking, all right, this team doesn't have Will Fuller. Let's run that same game plan back and make someone else other than DeAndre Hopkins beat us. And in that case, I think it is going to be, Kiki Kuti or Ryan Griffin more over the middle, and then, Watson maybe rushing, stuff like that. But yeah, that's such a big number. I think if you want your DeAndre Hopkins exposure, get it in DFS and you can be on the chalk with everybody else out there playing DeAndre.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I mean, we mentioned the Watson splits before with and without Fuller, and DeAndre Hopkins suffers by the same splits, not quite to the same degree as Watson, but he does do better with Fuller in the lineup. So as Fuller, takes away a lot of that deep attention.
Yeah, we do have Harpo's wondering about T.Y. Hilton. I guess now that we're back on this game, we talked about him a little bit at the top. He's banged up. Everyone knows he's not 100%, except that's been the case the past 3 to 4 weeks, and he's been producing. So it begs the question, how much does that even affect his production? Do you consider T.Y. like a mean median guy for spiked week stuff, or do you think he has a decent floor?
I mean, generally speaking, he's got one of the safest floors in the league in terms of yardage, maybe not in terms of receptions, but I don't know what to expect from him. I don't know what his health is at, and the thing about props is I don't want to guess because I don't have to, right? There's a million props out every week. We've been profitable because we attack the spots that we're familiar with and we see an edge in. And the thing with Hilton, I have no idea what's going on, so I'm not going to force the issue there. That 85.5, again, it's a number where it's quite large, and I'm not going to chase it personally, even though he's been really good against the Colts traditionally. Yep. So, I'm not going to chase that number, especially given his injury concerns. If you do want to play it and you want to play the over just for fun, I think it's probably a decent value, especially at, oh no, that's minus odds. I thought it was plus odds for a second there, but at minus odds, I like it even less. So yeah. The under, it looks like Bet Online anyway is offering 128 on the under of 85.5. So I see a ton of value there. I don't know that I'll play it, but I think that is the way to play it just from a value perspective.
Excellent. Yeah. I guess one of the sides we haven't really talked about yet is the Seahawks passing game. Doug Baldwin coming back into that offense again to reference another stat Warren Sharp was talking about, that they went from bottom of the league in explosive plays without Doug Baldwin to tied with the Chiefs when he is in the lineup as far as explosive plays, which does bode well, obviously, for their offense. Are you seeing any props with, let's say, maybe Russ, Baldwin, or Lockett, or even Nick Vannett has been a pick that I know you wrote up as well. And I also, our friends over at 4for4, they were looking at their DFS correlations, and one of the strongest ones they had was Russ Wilson with his tight ends, which again is kind of pointing us towards Vannett. What are you liking over on that side?
Yeah, I think that the Baldwin props and the Lockett props, the last couple of weeks, I haven't seen a lot of value there. I've played a couple Lockett props, and he always seems to end up right around the line. I think the projections for him are pretty close as well for Baldwin, over under 4 receptions. I think that's bang on. Don't see a lot of value there. Receiving yards, 55.5. I think that's bang on. Don't see a lot of value there. So yeah, I'm going to pivot to Nick Vannett on this one. I think that is a great play. Let me just bring this one up here for a sec. But where do we got this one?
Yeah, it looks like on Bovada they have it at 12.5, and you can get the over at minus 125.
Yeah. So yeah, I booked this at 5 dimes yesterday, over 12.5 receiving yards at 5 dimes, and plus 100 on that at 5 dimes. I'm not sure if that's still. So I love that. I mean, such a tiny number. A lot of times in these, this is one of my favorite ways to attack these kind of low totaled games. I think this is at 43, is just sort of find these secondary players that have been given really small numbers and hit the over. So yeah, Nick Vannett is in a really nice spot. The Cowboys secondary is excellent. I think that particularly against slot receivers, I think they were top 3 against slot receivers, if not the best. I think Seattle might have been the best, actually. But Seattle was excellent against slot receivers. Baldwin and Lockett both play a ton from the slot. I think 50 and 60% respectively. Against tight ends, however, just kind of mediocre. 19th most yards allowed per game at 61 over the season. And then that number has really gone downhill over the last half of the season. It ballooned up to 73.8 yards per game against opposing tight ends. They've allowed 16 different tight ends to go for 14 more yards or more on the season. The Cowboys did. And as we compare that to Nick Vannett's seasonal averages of 17.9 yards on 2.9 targets, those averages are well clear. And then he played the Cowboys this year, 27-yard outing. So yeah, the Cowboys, not exactly a weak spot, but relative to the rest of their pass defense, I think the tight end is a nice spot to attack, as well as the running backs, which we'll get to in a moment here. But yeah, Nick Vannett, that number is just minuscule. And, I think 2 targets is probably a median for him. And that might be all we need to get over 12.5. And then anything over that is a bonus. So such a tiny number. I really love it against a Dallas defense that's shown to be a little vulnerable in that area. But yeah, I don't see any value in the Baldwin and Lockett props personally. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I do like that, though. Byron Jones has been so good on the outside. So you got to imagine if it's Lockett who's seeing him, or maybe they just throw David Moore out there, that should open stuff over the middle. So I guess the only thing you worry about is they still use Ed Dickson a little bit, too, as their other tight end.
Yeah, they've had pretty much equal targets the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, so that that could eat into each other, but like you said, it's such a small number. Yeah. I mean, you could really get there with just one catch. I don't mind that at all. And he's, again, a nice, I keep talking about, getting your exposure in different ways. I'm not using him in DFS. There's so many other kind of better options, but to get a small number like that for the prop is a really good way to get exposure to it. You mentioned you wanted to maybe talk about the Dallas running game. Do you have anything with Zeke that's jumping out?
Yeah, Zeke is, again, it's one of those things where, I know Zeke is the sort of chalk in DFS this week, the sort of auto guy that you have to have in your lineup. But in prop betting, when there's a guy like that usually means it's a bit avoidable because the books know that too. The lines are really high on Zeke, and again, just going back to this idea where if I'm going to be attacking big numbers like the 90, what's he at? He's mid 90s, right?
95.5.
Yeah. So if I'm going to be attacking those big numbers again, I want it to be in a game where the Cowboys are favored by 2 scores, right? And I'm assured that workload where he's going to be getting those 20-plus carries. If he's going to be under 20-plus carries, that 95 is very tough to achieve. Despite efficiency and all that, it's just a very big number, even against the Seattle team that's done very well. So, yeah, Zeke's kind of a non-play for me. The way I would like to attack Zeke, if you do want to play it, is
looks like Bovada has the receiving yards at 40.5.
Yeah.
Or do you like the receptions?
Well, I like the under on both of those, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think that Seattle's been pretty decent against receiving running backs on the whole. Obviously Dallas has been using Zeke a lot more in the passing game. I think was behind only McCaffrey in the last half of the season. But yeah, Seahawks vulnerable against the run, so I don't see any reason why the Cowboys wouldn't really just try to establish the run. And, again, we saw that with those own looks. Again, Zeke, I think, finished right around 40 yards against the Colts. So I think that number is pretty much bang on. He's pretty good chance. I think he finishes around that 40 mark. I don't see him blowing it away unless he breaks a play. So if I'm playing Zeke, I'm probably looking at the under on the yards there, 40.5, maybe just a little high, but it's not a bad line by any means. And then the rushing line, too high for me. In a game that is, a 1.5 point spread, it doesn't indicate to me a huge workload for Zeke. He's really going to need a big number of carries against the Seahawks to get there. So too scary for me to chase that number.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up to see what our friend Sean thinks too, and he's got the under on receptions, he's got the under on receiving yards, under on rushing yards. Like you said, you see this happening with the big names. People want to bet the over. You see it more so next weekend for just spread bets. You can always get a point or two of value because everyone's wanting to bet on the big home favorites. Yeah. And there's normally some value baked in there as the books kind of adjust, and it seems like that's what's going on here with Zeke and Nuke especially. So if you want to, put your cojones out on the table and fade these guys, at least you can rest assured knowing you're probably getting at least 5 to 10 yards of value there. Yeah,
and I just want to go to bat for, everyone says Ben Battle gives me a hard time all the time for saying that overs are fun. You can't bet the unders. It's no fun. But for me, there's nothing better in props than going the under on Travis Kelce or an under on Ezekiel Elliott. And at the first half, they're just stymied for 20 yards, and you're just sort of laughing already. It's a good feeling because that everyone else is on the over. So I like playing unders on the big names like this. And if I was going to play Zeke, I'd play under. And I think unders are fun. I'm going to go to bat for unders and say they're as much fun as the over. You just have to sweat a bit more.
I was going to say, if you don't enjoy betting unders, you just don't know how to sweat it properly. You have to. Right. I got my annual trip with my college buddies in Vegas next week. And one of the things, it's just like when we're ever playing the under, even a total in a game, and it's just, you're just shouting out tick tock, just getting excited as the clock burns closer. You just need to reverse engineer your thinking, and it can be equally as fun. So yeah, don't sleep on betting unders. It can be a good time.
Totally agree. And there's going to be a lot of clock burning in this one. So
yeah. Yep. Let's see here. Well, we're getting close to lock here. It looks like our chat, maybe everyone is scrambling to go get their bets. We got Harple holding it down strong. Maybe we can go to some final thoughts here. We can also talk some more programming. We're going to run this back again tomorrow. for the Sunday game. So yeah, be sure to come back to that. You guys obviously need to visit bettheprop.com. And I believe, Cort, you're going to have a subscriber-only email coming out in a few hours.
Yeah, I'm going to dig in and try to find a good pick for our email subscribers. We're perfect on those picks this year. I really spend a lot of time on that pick and try to find one for our email subscribers that gets them a lot of value. And we haven't lost on those picks yet this year, although I will say 2 of those picks have been the exact same pick. Back-to-back weeks, we had Lamar Jackson under 16.5 completions, low variance play, a lot of value there. When I looked yesterday, I had seen the same line again, 16.5 at least one book. I haven't checked today on that yet to see if that's been adjusted. So I'm not going to make that again, the email pick, but we'll find something fresh. But yeah, be sure to head on over to bettheprop.com. You can see in the right box there, give us your email address. We're not going to bug you with spam and BS. We'll just give you some solid picks and only value emails. So we're going to give you that. Yeah, we'll have some more articles tomorrow. Maybe just we'll finish off. I did also want to mention the other pick in my article for the Action Network that's behind the paywall pick here. I think the overs on all the Seattle running backs are in play. We mentioned the Chris Carson line, 70.5, maybe a bit too low. I think the receiving line for Chris Carson is also playable. He's been a little bit hit and miss in that category. But one I am playing is Mike Davis. Over 10.5 receiving yards, minus 115 at 5 dimes. He's been a bit spiky in recent weeks, but he is averaging 3.3 targets and 20 yards per game over the past month. That's an increase over the 14.3 yards per game he's had on the year. And again, a bit of a weakness there for the Cowboys. They've yielded more catches to running backs than all but 4 teams, 6.3 catches per game. And again, trending down in that category, 7.3 catches per game over their last 3. They've really been lit up by receiving backs over the last month or so. Past 6 games, 40.1 receiving yards per game. So Mike Davis is the primary pass catching back for the Seahawks, which isn't a huge role. Kind of amounts to 2-3 targets a game per Davis. But again, it's just such a tiny number there, 10.5 yards. That it's pretty hard to resist. I really do think the Seahawks are going to deploy Davis a little bit there in the passing game, and I love that 10.5 number. So really, Seattle backs, I think all the overs are in play on receiving and rushing. I think Mike Davis's rushing yards line is quite low as well.
Yeah. Sean liked that one over there, the rushing. He had the over on 21 or 20 and a half yards for Davis. But hey, I have a very important correction here because I just learned that was not DeAndre Hopkins. That was T.Y. Hilton wearing
in the clown mask.
In the clown mask. So that's apologies for me. I just assumed, because of DeAndre's antics, that would have been him, but it is T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah, we don't see T.Y. doing that kind of stuff very often, do we?
No, yeah. The Zach Kiefer says T.Y. Hilton's ankle must be feeling pretty good if he's strolling in like that. Looks like and Harple had asked, and I think we touched on it, are you going for the T.Y. Hilton over? I'm pretty sure you said that's kind of a stay away for you, right?
Yeah, it's no play for me. It's an under or no play, but I'm not betting the under on that one. He's too explosive. Just takes 1 or 2 plays to get him over that mark. I do think that the value is in the under, but some unders are fun to play and others not so much. And Hilton, I don't think is a fun under to play just because it just takes 1 play from that guy, and he's so explosive, and he has done very well against the Texans in his career. So I'm not playing the over. I'd lean the under, but I'm just avoiding those. I generally avoid the big names. If people who follow me probably noticed that by now. I like to kind of target those secondary players who might have lines that are a bit too low, and Hilton just too big of a number for me to chase in a game with 43 total. Just not good value there, I think.
I'm doing some journalism over here. I have pulled up a photo of what DeAndre Hopkins walked into the arena. It actually looks very tasteful, like an all-white velour type suit, a very nice yellow knit cap beanie, and some spectacles. So he's more business trip. T.Y. Hilton is clowning around, so I just wanted to make sure people got that update. All right, guys, I think this is going to do it for us. We got 10 minutes until lock. Going to be a really fun set of games. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow sometime in the afternoon before that first game between the Chargers and the Ravens. We'll have some more discussion for you guys then. In the meantime, definitely visit bettheprop.com. You can check out Cort's articles, Ben Battle's articles. He also has an article up on the Action Network. You can subscribe to the newsletter to get that pick. Harpo's wondering when that's going out. It should be before the first set of games here, right?
Yeah, well, sometime today for sure. It'll probably be for tomorrow's slate, and we'll get it out sometime during today's games. So, and also just want to mention, we also have an article up on some monkey knife fight props. I know those aren't available to everyone, but it's something that's really growing in popularity. So we do have a friend of ours named Cody Byer who broke down a couple of the better bets there that are kind of interesting. So if your monkey knife fight's available for you, yeah, you can see it there, the Andrew Luck one.
Yep.
If you have those available in your state, your jurisdiction, have a look at those. Those games are a lot of fun. I haven't crunched the math on those to find out how much value is there, but they're definitely a lot of fun and a little bit of a different twist on prop betting. So we got a little bit of analysis there for the monkey knife fight as well.
Excellent.
And we'll have some more tomorrow.
Yeah. And I'll just say one last thing. If you are enjoying this, feel free to subscribe to this channel. If this is your first exposure to the channel, then there might be some weird things that pop up with a guy named Pete Manzanelli, more in the DFS space. But I believe you will enjoy it if you enjoy all this prop DFS type content. All right, so for Cort, for Bet the Prop, I'm Peter Overzet. Good luck this week, guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow.